Assalamu alaikum students, I hope you all are well, safe and healthy at home and giving time to your studies. So dear students, welcome to all of you in this class of classical and Renaissance drama, and today I'm here with some other information, some other important points of the play The Bacchae. Basically, we have started this tragedy in the last lecture, in which we have discussed the summary, the major and minor characters of this play, and we also talked about the life history of the Greek playwright Euripides. Well, in today's class, we will talk about more on this tragedy, The Bacchae. Let's start from the topic. Well, first of all, the introduction of this tragedy. Basically, as you all are aware, because in previous class we have discussed about it, The Bacchae is a Greek tragedy written by the playwright Euripides in 407 BC. So, in today's class, basically, I'll tell you about the plot of this play. After that, you will learn about the theme of this play, the major important theme, control versus freedom. Well, the next point which we will discuss in this class is the role of disguise in this play. So let's start first of all from the plot of this play. So this play basically begins with a prologue. You all are aware that prologue is basically a preface or an introduction to a literary work. In a dramatic work, the term describes as speech, often in verse, which is basically addressed to the audience by one or more of the actors. Basically, in the start of the play, some of the verses are stated. In the Greek tragedy, it was basically a tradition in which usually the poetry and sometimes the dramatic works start from the verses, which are basically called prologue, preface, or in other sense we can say the introduction, which tells the audience a lot about the tragedy, about the play, or in other sense we can say it can be the introduction, which announces toward the audience that what is going to happen, and basically it can be the introduction which is specifically introducing something. So this is basically the prologue, because the play starts from the prologue. And while talking about the plot, Euripides' Bacchae basically has taken place in the Greek city of Thebes, which is a location which we commonly notice that it is the location a majority of the Greek writers were used to mention the specific location of Thebes in their plays and tragedies or dramas, whatever we can say. So Dionysius himself delivers the prologue speech in this tragedy, in this drama, so in which he reveals his true identity to the audience, and then he disguised himself as a stranger, and then he traveled to Thebes from Asia, right? And he has chosen this city of Thebes to be the first in Greece that worships him. So after that, you can see this is basically the prologue of this play. Basically, he says in the prologue, I came here, my first Greek city, only after I had stated initiations there and set those places dancing so that mortals would see me clearly as divine. Now Thebes is my choice to be the first place I have filled with cries of ecstasy, clothed in fawn skin, put Tiresias in hand this ivy-covered spear, because my mother's sisters of all people, they should have known better. But said Dionysius was no son of Zeus. So it was the prologue of the play, or in other sense we can say the speech. So Dionysius has already begun the process of initiation, and he has caused the Theban women to abandon their homes for Mount Cithron in order to partake in the worshipping of the god. He then concludes his speech by establishing that he will reveal to Pentheus his divine status, that he will force the city of Thebes to accept and acknowledge him as the divinity which he is. So after the prologue, the Cadmus and Tiresias appear on the stage, dressed up as worshippers of Dionysius. They both have acknowledged his divine nature and accepted his cult into Thebes. In the opening dialogue of the first episode, they discuss with one another where they should perform their dances. Cadmus asks Tiresias, "Where should we go to dance? Where plant our feet and toes our heads, grey as they are? By my guide in religion, Tiresias the old leading the old, since you are so wise." After that, the Pentheus enters onto the stage with the seer and his uncle. Despite having been away from the city, he has heard about the shameful acts of the Theban women. According to the current king of Thebes, they are pretending to be Bacchantes, but in fact they are sleeping with other men instead of worshipping this fake god. So both Cadmus and Tiresias then plead with Pentheus to see reason to proclaim that Dionysius is the son of Zeus. Then Tiresias criticizes the king in these words, "When a prudent speaker takes up a noble cause, he'll have no great trouble to speak well. You, on the other hand, have a tongue that runs on smoothly and sounds intelligent, but what it says is brainless." So the Cadmus echoes Tiresias' sentiment when he says in these wording that Tiresias' advice is excellent, my boy. Stay home with us, don't cross the threshold of law. You are flitting about, you know, so thoughtless the way you think. So despite their attempts at persuasion and rationale, Pentheus refuses to acknowledge Dionysius as a god and son of Zeus, and he vows to imprison the stranger that has infected his citizens with his madness. So in the second episode, the Pentheus and Dionysius meet on stage for the first time. However, Pentheus doesn't know that it is the god himself with whom he is speaking and whom he has put in chains. So Dionysius, as the stranger, informs Pentheus of his rituals. When Pentheus tells the stranger that he will remain under guard, the latter claims that Dionysius will release him from his imprisonment. So here you can see the statements of Pentheus and Dionysius. Dionysius says that God himself will set me free whenever I want. Pentheus says, sure he will, whenever you stand among your Bacchae and summon him. Dionysius, even now he is very near, and he sees what I am suffering. Pentheus, then where is he? He hasn't revealed himself to me. Dionysius, he is where I am. You don't see him because you lack reverence. So, Dionysius adheres to his promise, and in the following episode, he escapes from his chains, causing Pentheus' palace to crumble. Pentheus meets with a stranger outside of his home and demands to know how he escaped. Dionysius and Pentheus are interrupted when the herdsman appears on the stage in order to relate to Pentheus what he had just witnessed at Mount Cithron. He and others had attempted to capture Agua in order to bring her to the king. However, they were spotted by the Maenads and were forced to flee. So the herdsman then recounts the Maenads tearing apart of animal limbs from limb and their destruction of the two villages. So he concludes by urging Pentheus to accept the worship of Dionysius, just as Tiresias and Cadmus had done in the first episode. So, in episode 3, Pentheus, in a state of disgust and outrage at the behavior of his female citizens, commands members of his army to prepare to fight the Menids. So, as the stranger, Dionysius warns the king of his actions and proposes an alternative. Dionysius asks Pentheus, "Would you like to see the women gathered on the mountain?" Surprisingly, Pentheus enthusiastically agrees to see the Menids. So, despite the condition that he has to dress as a woman, just as the king of Thebes does not know the true identity of the stranger, he is also ignorant of Dionysius' forthcoming punishment for his lack of reverence. So Dionysius exclaims in these lines, "Now I am off to get the fine clothes I'll fit to Pentheus for his trip to Hades. When his mother kills him, then he will know the son of Zeus, Dionysius, and realize that he was born a god, bringing terror for initiation and to the people gentle grace." So in episode 4, Dionysius and Pentheus arrive on Mount Cithron. The god informs Pentheus, "Your mental state used to be unhealthy, not it is as it should be." So Dionysius exits the stage and the chorus yell their orders to the Menids. Basically, they claims the yells, "Run, swift hounds of madness, run to mountain. Find where Cadmus' daughters hold their celebration. Sting them to fury at the man who parties in a woman's outfit and spies in madness on Menenids." So the chorus basically ended and finished their choral ode by singing of the death of Pentheus in episode 4. So the episode 5 basically begins with Pentheus' servant delivering the second messenger's speech. This time, however, it is not animals that are being torn apart by the hands of the Menids, but Pentheus. The messenger tells of Agave, who, while believing her son to be a dangerous lion, tore his body to pieces, just as Pentheus did not recognize the god Dionysius. His mother not recognize her son. So the other Menids, Agave's sisters, joined the king's destruction. So in the fifth play, they joined the destruction in these lines of went one with a forearm, and other took his foot with its hunting bow, and his ribs were stripped, flesh torn away. They all had blood on their hands. They tossed Pentheus' meat like balls in a game of catch. So after the episode 5, there is Exodus in the play. As prologue is the preface, introduction of plays or poetry, whatever the writer is going to write. Similarly, Exodus is basically the literal meaning of the Exodus is basically going out, means ending. In the end of the play. Usually the Exodus is added by the writers. In other sense, we can say to conclude. So sometimes it can be in the form of the chorus, and sometimes it is also performed as the speech. So following the messenger's speech, Agave enters the stage for the Exodus. So in this play, the Exodus is stated by the Agave. So still maddened and under the power of Dionysius, she carries Pentheus' head on a stick, proclaiming triumph over the lion, which she believes she has killed. When Cadmus appears on the stage, he is shocked by the ghostly image. He guides his daughter back to sanity, and Agave truly sees what she is holding. Despite their worship of Dionysius, both Cadmus and Agave are punished by the god who banishes them from Thebes. In this last, Agave stated, "I weep for you, father, and Cadmus, and I for you, my child, and for your sisters." So it was the plot of this play, in which I basically tried to explain with some of the lines, some of the text of the play, just to tell you that how can you understand the text. So after that, after the play, now I'll tell you about the theme, the most important theme, which is control versus freedom of this. Dionysius basically, in this play, Euripides basically tried to present, tried to depict his society. And basically, Dionysius has been established as a legitimate god in the Greek pantheon, and he became associated with civic forms such as theatre, wine, festivals, democracy, and general revelry. So Euripides, according to Euripides, the relationship between Dionysius and the established social order was still being contested, and this is what he tried to depict in this play. So his play attempts to answer the question of whether there can be a space for the irrational within a well-structured and ordered space, either interior or exterior. So the Bacchae depicts a struggle to the death between the twin forces of control and freedom, and permits Dionysius to provide an answer to this question in this play by the acts basically. So the god's implicit message is that not only is there space within society for the irrational, but that such a space must be allowed for that society to exist and thrive. By denying or opposing the irrational, as Pentheus did in this play, the person who opposes it or the society who denies will be torn apart, as happened with Pentheus in this play. So the story of Pentheus and Thebes demonstrates the necessity of self-control, and there is less freedom. This is the control, this is basically the theme which has been depicted by Euripides in this play. So let me tell you the last important point of the play, role of disguise in the play. Basically, much of the tension and action of the play comes about due to two important disguises. Dionysius disguised as stranger and Pentheus as the female Bacchae. So in Euripidean tragedy, Bacchae Pentheus opposes himself to Dionysius, who is disguised in a Lydian visor for the man in question. We are informed through Pentheus that he has arrived in Thebes. He sings songs and his blonde locks are fragrant. Later in the play, the Lydian visor incites Pentheus to go to the area of Menes disguised into a woman. As we will see further down, finally he positions him standing on a fire tree and asks Bacchae to punish him for mocking them. Dionysius and their celebrations. So Pentheus need to disguise in order to go to the area of Menes is intimated to the young man from Dionysius, who is also the one to suggest how to get dressed so that he will not be noticed. He must wear a linen long dress, fawn skin, and to hold a Tiresias. In addition, his hair must look feminine, that is so to have a long plait and a headdress. So in the beginning, the young man is opposed to disguise, but in the end, he is persuaded to dress like a woman in order to be able to spy on the Menes undisturbed. So the use of disguise was a comment on theatre itself and its powers. More specifically, Pentheus' disguise resonates in other ways. Basically, Bacchae ritual often involved costume enactments representing the death of an old self and the rebirth of a new self, dedication to the deity. So Pentheus, not a willing devotee, but an impious impostor, is literally killed after being dressed by Dionysius, with no possibility of being reborn into the cult. Pentheus' cross-dressing echoes the common Greek notion of the rite of passage, usually from boyhood to manhood, and the position of wearer. In this sense, Pentheus' cross-dressing would have appeared to ancient Greek audiences as a failed rite of passage, since he never realizes his transformation and induction into courage. So it was the role of disguise. There were two disguised role play in this tragedy. So it was all about today's lecture. So dear students, in this class we have discussed about the play. There were 5 episodes, one prologue and one exodus in this play. Briefly, I told you about the play, including the some chunks of text. So after the plot, we have discussed about the theme, most important thing, control versus freedom. So according to this theme, everything is in the control of the God. Well, the last important point which we have discussed is the role of the disguised. As I told you, there were two disguised actors in this play. So it's all about today's class. I hope every point is clear to all of you now. In case of any confusion, you can talk to me in the WhatsApp group, and we can also discuss in the class discussion. So take care. Allah.